Despite some early doubts, Nintendo's new console, the Switch, is quickly proving itself to be a resounding success, with the device being the home of some of the most critically acclaimed titles of this generation of games. With a great roster of games set to be released over the coming year, there is already speculation that the Switch will go down as one of the best consoles in gaming history, and whilst I do think the Switch is the best thing Nintendo has put its name to in a very long while, I think there is another Nintendo console that has a much stronger claim to the title of greatest console of all time. Of course, the Nintendo DS. This topic is obviously highly contentious, and I'm anticipating a lot of people are going to be annoyed that their favourite console hasn't been mentioned, or that a particular game wasn't acknowledged in this essay, or what have you. But I do think there's a very strong argument to be made that the DS really was the greatest console ever, and if that's not the case, then certainly the most influential. Selling over 154 million units worldwide, the Nintendo DS currently stands as the second best-selling console of all time, surpassed only by the PS2. And this is because the DS not only innovated in terms of its design and groundbreaking technology, but also its mass array of fantastic titles, which bridged the gap between casual and hardcore gaming in a way that had seldom been attempted before. By far the most significant innovation that the DS brought to the table, and certainly its biggest initial selling point, was its implementation of touchscreen technology. Given today's preoccupation with all things touch, it's hard to imagine a world in which the announcement of a console with a touchscreen would be met with skepticism. But for many game journalists, the DS's employment of the technology appeared to be a serious risk that was unlikely to pay off. This was in part due to Nintendo's bizarre marketing for the console, which, as Jeremy Parish notes, was introduced without preamble, with barely a hint that a new system was in the works. Without any sort of imagery, no game demos, no prototype handhelds, no target renders, simply a statement of intent, and stunningly, the promise that the console would be on the market by the end of 2004. Look, I'm not saying that the DS was the first device to use touchscreen technology, but it was the first console to push this technology as its USP. To many journalists, the DS brought back memories of Nintendo's other attempt at a technologically innovative console, the much maligned Virtual Boy. Moreover, when the first set of launch titles were announced, including a cooking game, a dating simulator, and weirdly, a more developed version of the console's own PictoChat, it appeared that the DS stood little chance against its rival, the seemingly more sophisticated PSP. Except, as we now know, all these fears were for nothing, and the DS easily defeated the PSP in the early stages of the handheld console war, and boldly introduced touchscreen technology into the gaming mainstream. The touchscreen also redefined Nintendo as a company, not only with a rich heritage, but also as a company that was at the forefront of new gaming technology. Successive consoles produced by Nintendo have all involved a cell based on a new, innovative form of technology, and it's hard to see that a console like the Wii or the Switch would have been developed had the DS not been so successful. It wasn't just the touchscreen that was innovative, as the console's dual-screen interface allowed for totally new gaming experiences. Whilst early launch games mostly saw the bottom screen used to either display additional information or as a way to control the action in screen 1, later DS titles understood how to better incorporate both screens simultaneously, and allowed the player to solve complex puzzles which required the utilisation of both screens. Similarly, the incorporation of a microphone was also something new, and, when combined with both screens and the stylus, meant that entirely new ways of playing were now possible. Whether it be using the device to play strange new minigames on titles like Project Rub, or using the stylus to stroke your Nintendog whilst also speaking to it through the microphone. The technological triumphs of the DS not only extended to its user experience, but also to developers, with its ARM processor identical to that of the Game Boy Advance, making it far easier and, crucially, cheaper to develop than the higher spec PSP, and thus more attractive to developers who wanted to reduce costs while utilising all of the new system's potential. The DS's ease of portability also makes it a candidate for best console ever. Whilst portable consoles such as the Game Boy had first allowed users to take their games on the road, The introduction of a rechargeable battery to the device made it arguably the first portable device that could be played anywhere at any time. Unlike the Game Boy or its successor, the Game Boy Advance, there was no need to replace the console's batteries, and it was very unlikely that users were to find themselves in a position where the console would abruptly switch off due to lack of charge. The DS was also arguably the first truly global gaming experience. It is taken as a given now that users are able to connect and compete from across the world with other users in online competitive environments, but the DS's use of Wi-Fi was revolutionary at the time, and allowed for the creation of global leaderboards for titles such as Mario Kart. The reverberations of this innovation can be seen in all facets of mobile gaming, and the upsurge in free Wi-Fi from places such as Starbucks and McDonald's meant even users who did not possess a high-speed internet connection were able to get in on the deal. Wi-Fi aside, the DS also went to great lengths to streamline the portable multiplayer experience. Whereas the Game Boy Advance had required the use of clunky link cables to allow players to connect with one another, the DS supported wireless connection between devices, and more importantly, thanks to the DS download play feature, many games allowed a multiplayer experience which relied only on a single game card, with other users temporarily being able to play the game if they were connected to a host device. But none of these innovations would have made the DS an unprecedented success if it weren't for the fact that it was bolstered by a massive back catalogue of quality games. Titles such as Phoenix Wright, Hotel Dusk, and Elite Beat Agents were among some of the most innovative games of their time, and developed huge cult followings. Likewise, the console also played host to some of the best expansions of existing Nintendo franchises, with games such as Mario Kart, Advance Wars, and New Super Mario Bros. And Kirby Canvas Curse being amongst the best in their respective series. But to me, these games aren't what make the DS the greatest console of all time. Rather, the games that defined the DS, and perhaps the next wave of Nintendo consoles, were those that appealed to casual gamers, or people who had never picked up a console in their lives. Nintendogs, one of the most successful DS titles, filled the gap that had been left by the Tamagotchi to become the premier pet simulator, selling close to 24 million copies. The game's success relied on its appeal to non-gamers, with the game being marketed more as an activity or toy, much like the Tamagotchi, than a fully fledged game. At the same time, the franchise had many of the same mechanisms of an actual game: challenges, unlockables, and a reward system based on playtime, which prevented it from being derided by more serious gamers. Similarly, Brain Training was a title that was marketed aggressively towards the 65+ market, one that rarely, if ever, played video games, and part of the title's appeal was that it was sold as an educational tool, rather than a game, which removed the associated stigma around the idea of playing video games. Nintendo would explore this concept further with titles such as Wii Sports and Wii Fit, but it was the DS which first put forward the idea that a console could be more than something that played games. It could be a device that could be used as a means of self-improvement. Similarly, the DS was almost directly responsible for the mass proliferation of the microgame format. Titles such as 42 All-Time Classics, Picross, and of course, WarioWare were made to be played for both short and long periods of time. And this fitted perfectly with gamers who wanted to get a sense of immediate reward from their games, whilst commuting, travelling, or simply wanting something to do for 5 minutes. Because of the popularity of smartphones, this sort of micro-gaming is extremely commonplace now, but it was the DS, with its mass popular appeal, which paved the way for mobile gaming to be something more than another variant of Snake or Bejeweled. I mean, one of WarioWare's microgames is literally a precursor to Doodle Jump. I'm definitely expecting hundreds of comments to fly in, telling me how wrong I am, or that the DS is the worst console ever, or that PC gaming is the only real way to play games, and it's certainly true that the majority of consoles have a stack of killer games and some degree of innovation, but I think it's difficult to ignore how bloody important the DS is when it comes to looking at the history of the handheld console. Whilst the Wii and the Switch may prove more popular as the years go on, it's important to remember how special the Nintendo DS really is. Not only was it a device which constituted numerous technological breakthroughs, but it was also bolstered by a massive back catalogue of incredible games, which targeted a plethora of gamers, both old and young. If that doesn't make the DS special, then I don't know what does. If you'd like to see more from Full Fat videos, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. And of course, keep drinking some full fat milk.